You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 660 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, and that song you're hearing right now is, of course, Leave the Lights On from our good friends in Passafire. You can check those guys out anywhere you get your music, and was all set, all prepared to come on here and talk about, the best and worst case scenarios for what I believe will be the Rangers' third line, and to kind of spoil a future episode, I think it's going to be Barclay Goodrow, Filip Chytil, and Vitaly Krasov. Going to have a lot to say about those three players whenever we end up doing that episode. But, every now and then you got to call an audible, and I think when the news breaks from Larry Brooks, as well as our friend Anthony Scultori of Forever Blue Shirts, that Nils Lundkvist has asked for a trade from the New York Rangers and is unlikely to report to training camp, you got to adjust on the fly. Like I said, call a little bit of an audible, and we'll shift our attention to that. And there's obviously a lot to talk about here as well. And I got to give a special shout out to Anthony Scultori. For starters, once again, friend of the show. He's been on the podcast a couple of times. We'll definitely have him back on here in the future, maybe sometime before the season starts. But, he kind of saw the writing on the wall and had an article at the beginning of August where he openly wondered, where exactly does Nils Lundkvist fit in with this team the way things currently stand? And he also, back in February, an article that he had back in February, he ID'd Nils Lundkvist as one of the Rangers' top trade chips at that time, which it's easy to see where he's coming from, because again, we're going to talk about this a little bit later in greater detail, but when you look at the Ranger depth chart right now, I don't have to tell you guys, you guys follow this team, but you've got on the right side, Adam Fox, Jacob Trouba, and now Braden Schneider. They're all holding it down. There just doesn't seem to be any room for Nils Lundkvist when you consider that, Fox is one of the absolute best defensemen in the world. Jacob Trouba is now the team captain. They're both locked up long-term. And Braden Schneider making the most of his opportunity last season and really establishing himself, I think, as somebody who is going to be penciled into this Ranger lineup for probably the foreseeable future here. So you see where the issues come in when it comes to the Rangers trying to figure out a way to squeeze Lundkvist into the lineup. And also, this came from a tweet from Anthony. Lundkvist's agent is Claude Lemieux, and he said that they actually requested a trade last season when Nils Lundkvist was sent down by the Rangers to the Hartford Wolf Pack. How many different Rangers have now requested a trade after being sent down to Hartford? Someone ought to tell these guys that it's not necessarily a death sentence. You can come back from this. I get the frustration to a certain extent, and of course you get sent down, prove everybody wrong and get back up there as soon as you can. But man, just go back to work and fight your way back up there. Anyway, Nils Lundkvist, I kind of just take it from the top here and just kind of, talk about how he came into becoming a New York Ranger. To begin with, he was drafted in the first round by the Rangers back in 2018. He went number 28 overall to the Rangers in that draft. He is now 22 years old, 5'10", 187 pounds. Last season, Nils Lundkvist actually made the Rangers opening night roster. The interesting thing was that he was not active for this team on opening night. The Rangers opened with a road game against the Washington Capitals. And, I think maybe some fisticuffs were expected. Nothing ever really happened. We were coming off the whole Tom Wilson insanity from the previous season. There weren't any fights in that game, I don't think. And if there were, Reeves and Wilson did not fight each other, and they were not involved in any other fights either. But the bottom line is they scratched Nils Lundkvist for that game in favor of, wait for it, Jared Tenorti. Yeah, Jared Tenorti was out there on opening night. Nils Lundkvist wasn't. But after that night, Lundkvist was occasionally a healthy scratch for the Rangers, in the forthcoming days and weeks going forward after that game. But he, for the most part, was playing pretty much night in and night out. He was out there far more often than not before he was ultimately sent down to the Hartford Wolf Pack. And In 25 games with the Rangers this past season, 1 goal, 3 assists. He was a +4 in that time. With the Hartford Wolf Pack, Lundkvist skated in 34 games, scored 3 goals, had 12 assists. He was a -9. Now, I didn't get to watch a ton of Hartford Wolf Pack games this past season. The Rangers keep me plenty busy, but there were several reports out of, Hartford, pretty much anybody that covers the Rangers and or the Hartford Wolf Pack, where Lundkvist was scuffling down there quite a bit. So that obviously didn't really bode well for his chances of being called back up. And when Braden Schneider pretty much hit the ground running, it kind of sealed his fate that, no, we weren't going to see any more of Nils Lundkvist this past season, barring an injury of some kind, of course. As far as where he stands as far as his contract is concerned, Nils Lundkvist is on the second year of his entry-level deal, pays him $925K per season at the NHL level, and then he will be a restricted free agent in 2024-2025. So Chris Drury and the Ranger front office, they're under no obligation to, adhere to his trade request. They don't have to trade him. And we've seen times in the past where certain players request trades, whether it's Elias Anderson or Vitaly Kravtsov or Alex Georgiev. He doesn't necessarily just, trade somebody because they want to be traded. Although it sounds like, per this report from Larry Brooks, that the Rangers are, I believe the term he used was they're making an accelerated push to try to trade him before training camp begins. And possibly the reason for that is that, Chris Drury, he might see the writing on the wall too, where, okay, we've got 3 great defensemen on the right side, Fox, Trouba, and Schneider, and the longer I wait to trade this guy, and the more he just, sits in Hartford and plays with the Wolf Pack, and he can't crack this NHL roster, the less leverage I'm going to have. Because if you have this former first-round pick, but you will not play him at the NHL roster, then sooner or later, your leverage is going to take a little bit of hit in trade talks, because teams that are looking to acquire him can say, okay, well, this guy's so great, what's he doing on your AHL team, for the majority of his career here. So I think that probably is the reason why Drury would look to get a deal done sooner rather than later. We'll see if anything can come to fruition here before training camp starts. Again, Lundkvist and his camp have said that he's not planning on reporting to training camp. I guess never say never, but I would imagine they'll probably stick to their guns there. And it's interesting because it kind of reminds me of last year's training camp. Lundkvist was part of what was really the only roster spot battle on the New York Rangers. And you think, the Rangers are a young team and, there's a lot of spots up for grabs. That wasn't really the case going into this past season. Most of the jobs were spoken for. The one spot that was open was that 6th and final defenseman spot. And the battle was really coming down to just 2 people, and that would be Lundkvist himself as well as Zac Jones. And Lundkvist ended up winning that position battle and making the opening night roster, whereas Jones was sent down to the Hartford Wolf Pack. And, Lundkvist, he ends up, again, just playing in the 25 games for the Rangers this season. Zac Jones played in just 7 games for the Rangers this past season after playing in 12 the season before. But if we're kind of comparing and contrasting the two of them, and I realize it's a fairly small sample size for both of these players, but I liked what I saw from Zac Jones more than what I saw from Nils Lundkvist. And, forget about stats because, again, it's just too small of a sample size to really get too worked up about it. Just the eye test, just watching them go about their business, just watching, which player looks more poised, looks more confident, looks like he's ready for prime time more so than the other one. I would say that would be Zac Jones over Nils Lundkvist. Lundkvist, at times, it just looked like the game was moving kind of fast on him. There were times where, he was caught out of position, just didn't seem like he was ready for the physicality of the NHL. Not that him or Zac Jones, either one of them, are these towering, ultra-physical defensemen. But I don't know, Lundkvist, you just watch him, you watch the body language, you watch him go about his business, shift by shift by shift. It just didn't seem like he was all the way there yet. Whereas Zac Jones, he played, again, 10 games with the Rangers at the end of the 2020-2021 season. There were times where he was out there paired off with Adam Fox. The Rangers kind of shuffled the deck a little bit toward the end of that season. And I thought Jones, for the most part, did a nice job with the team that season. It was a very small sample size. There were a couple of hiccups here and there. But to me, you asked me straight up, which one of these guys looked more ready for prime time in the relatively small sample size that we saw from each of them? I would say Zac Jones there. And the other advantage that Zac Jones has in his favor, if there's going to be another position battle, if Nils Lundkvist is still here, and you've got guys like Lundkvist and Zac Jones, maybe Matthew Robertson, a couple other guys gunning for that 6th and final defenseman spot. The other thing that Jones has firmly working in his favor is that he plays the left side. And guess where the Rangers have an opening? Well, that would be the left side because, again, we've already covered this. We've got three, very, very good defensemen, if not elite defensemen, playing the right side. Now, could Lundkvist move to the from the right side to the left side and figure it out there and be a contributor for this Ranger team? It's possible, but again, I think Jones already has the leg up when you consider that he's on his natural side. Lundkvist is not. We're going to continue talking about every aspect of this trade request from Nils Lundkvist, including what the Rangers could look to get in return, for Nils Lundkvist. We'll do all that in just a second, but first, I just want to let everybody know. Today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week games. BetOnline is also your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including the NHL, MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. All right, so I think I might have misspoke just a second ago. I just want to correct myself real quick here. I mentioned the total amount of games played for Zac Jones. I think I was just off. Jones played 10 games with the Rangers at the end of the 2020-2021 season. And then this past season, he got 12 games with the Rangers. I think my numbers were slightly off there. In those games combined, for anybody wondering, no goals, 6 assists, and a -9. Was not perfect, but like I just said a couple minutes ago, I thought Zac Jones, to me at least, looked a little bit more prime for the big lights of New York City than did Nils Lundkvist. You guys can chime in and let me know what you think. That's just the eye test. I don't really have any advanced metrics or anything to back it up. Just watching them go about their business and play hockey for this New York Ranger team, Zac Jones, to me, looked more ready to go than did Nils Lundkvist. But to kind of keep it rolling here, I can't help but think about some of the contemporaries of Nils Lundkvist when it comes to a situation like this. And, I don't want to bash Nils Lundkvist because, look, he played 25 games with the Rangers, didn't really do so great with them. And as a result, he was sent out to the Hartford Wolf Pack, and probably rightfully so. Definitely rightfully so when you consider what Braden Schneider did once he got the opportunity. But, I look at this roster for the Rangers right now. This team is basically chock full of young defensemen who took advantage of an opportunity to play. And, Adam Fox, he's an example of that. He was always going to find a spot in the lineup. The Rangers traded 2 second-round picks to get him. They always had big plans for Adam Fox, and I think sooner or later he was always going to be penciled in to this Ranger lineup. And of course, as we mentioned, now an elite defenseman in this league. But man, you look at guys like Ryan Lindgren, Keiondre Miller, Braden Schneider, all these guys had to earn their keep. Ryan Lindgren, established himself as just a hard-nosed throwback defenseman, and even he was sent back down to Hartford briefly after playing with the Rangers. Didn't whine about it, didn't complain about it, didn't ask for a trade or anything like that. Just worked his way back up, and once he got a second chance, he played well in the first opportunity that he had with the Rangers. It was just kind of a numbers game where somebody came back from being injured and he had to be sent back down. I don't remember who it was. But bottom line, Lindgren was eventually called back up. And at this time, he was so good, they were never going to send him back down to the Wolf Pack ever again. So he took advantage. Keiondre Miller, he made the opening night roster for the Rangers 2 years ago. And I remember he had a really rough opening night performance. The Rangers played the Islanders that night, and they lost. They got shut out. I think the final score was 4-0, and Miller was really shaky. Not that it really mattered. The entire Ranger team played poorly that night. But man, Miller, almost immediately, a complete 180. I'll never forget, within the first 10 games that season, the Rangers are playing the Penguins, and Miller is shadowing Sidney Crosby behind the Ranger net, and Crosby's going this way, and he's going that way, and just cannot get away from Keiondre Miller. And then Miller eventually knocks Crosby off the puck, skates away with the puck, and Sidney Crosby's been mad at him ever since. So Miller, again, basically, other than a shaky opening night, hit the ground running for this team and is on the verge of superstardom. And then you've got Braden Schneider, who, again, he got the opportunity last year. Now, look, he had some moments every now and then where he kind of reminded you that he was a rookie, turn over the puck or whatever it might be, get caught out of position. But this guy established a physical tone, looked like he belonged right away, and looked like the guy that for the year he was drafted in 2020, a lot of scouts were saying that this guy has as safe of a floor as any player in this draft class. And I think we're seeing that because he's already, a bona fide NHL defenseman. I don't think there's any chance that Braden Schneider is going anywhere. He's going to be a big part of this Ranger team this upcoming season. But I mention all this because it just seems like recently, at least, Nils Lundkvist, and I guess maybe Zac Jones to a lesser extent, but mostly Nils Lundkvist was the one guy that just was not quite able to take advantage of the opportunity the way that some of his peers were, some of the guys that I just mentioned. Doesn't mean that, again, he's not going to have a good future in this league. Doesn't mean that, he's doomed to be a first-round bust or anything like that. But, we wouldn't even be having this conversation about Lundkvist asking for a trade if he, hit the ground running in the same way that some of his peers did. And I realize it's a little bit unfair, but at the same time, is it really unfair? Because, we saw, once again, guys like Miller and Schneider and Lindgren, all these guys had to earn their keep, and they all did it by, once again, pretty much hitting the ground running. Nils Lundkvist just wasn't able to do that. I mentioned not too long ago that, one path to playing time for Nils Lundkvist could be if he moves to the left side. He's naturally a right defenseman, but there is that opening on the left side. That's really the only opening as far as defensemen are concerned for the Rangers. But you look at the depth chart right now and the guys that are, prospects and could be coming along, there's serious competition. I already mentioned Zac Jones. Those two were neck and neck last season in the training camp as well as the preseason. Matthew Robertson is somebody that I think a lot of Ranger fans should keep an eye on because he's somebody that the Rangers really seem to like. He's a big defenseman, plays kind of an old school style, big, tough, physical guy. Some offensive skills, but for the most part, I think Robertson is known more as a stay-at-home defenseman, and he was Braden Schneider's former defense partner in Hartford. They were the top pairing there, and Robertson is said to have a similar skill set as Braden Schneider, or at least somewhat similar. You could even throw Libor Hájek in there. I realize that's not exactly an exciting name among most Ranger fans. And I think the Rangers at this point with Hájek, they're looking at him as kind of the seventh defenseman. I don't see, Libor Hájek being somebody that's going to be in the lineup night in and night out. And I don't think the Rangers see that either. He's there as kind of just, insurance if somebody gets hurt. And you need to plug in Hájek for a game or two, whatever it might be, you can do that. But I don't think they see him as somebody that's a real threat to, take the sixth defenseman job and run with it. That won't happen without him having just a ridiculously good training camp and a ridiculously good preseason. But then you've got some other guys. Hunter Skinner, he is also a homegrown prospect for this Ranger team. You've also got Ty Emberson. Admittedly, I don't know as much about him as a lot of the other Ranger defensemen, but he came over in the Patrick Nemeth trade. The Rangers sent 2 second-round picks to the Coyotes along with Nemeth, and they got Ty Emberson in return as part of the return package in that trade. So, yeah, there's a lot of names there, and it just feels like Lundkvist really has his work cut out for him as far as, potentially securing a spot on this roster, and that's even more true when you consider that he got the chance last year, just was not quite able to take advantage of it. We are going to get to a couple other aspects of this potential trade of Nils Lundkvist, including what the Rangers could expect to receive in a trade, what they might get back for him. I think anybody expecting the Rangers to, package Nils Lundkvist for Patrick Kane, you probably want to pump the brakes a little bit. I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll talk about what could be a realistic return for Nils Lundkvist. And also going to talk about, just the entire concept of giving up on a first-round pick this fast. I can understand, especially with Lundkvist demanding a trade, why the Rangers are doing it, but it's nothing to sneeze at either when you give up on a first-rounder after he plays just 25 games with your team. And we're going to get into all that good stuff in just a second. All right, so as I was just talking about, we're going to go ahead and basically just talk about, the just general concept of giving up on a first-round pick. I mean, I say giving up. They're not entirely giving up. They sort of are if they trade Nils Lundkvist, but at least in this situation, you can understand where the Rangers are coming from because it all goes back to what I was talking about earlier, the fact that, once again, the Rangers have Fox, Trouba, and Schneider on the right side, and probably somebody else is going to play the third pairing left defenseman spot that is seemingly the only opening to playing time for Nils Lundkvist. But, just to kind of go back, I mentioned that Lundkvist was a first-round draft pick, number 28 overall back in 2018. It was an interesting first round for the Rangers that season because they actually had 3 first-round picks, and Lundkvist was the third of those 3 first-round picks. The first pick that the Rangers made was number 9 overall. That would be Vitaly Kravtsov, who I mean, you can basically write a book about everything that's happened between him and the Rangers so far, and he's only played 20 games with them. And you guys know what I'm talking about. We don't need to open that can of worms today. But, earlier not to go on too much of a tangent here, but earlier this offseason, I was talking about, Vitaly Kravtsov, and I think there's a really good chance he's going to get traded before opening night. I don't think that's going to happen now. Kravtsov is back with the Rangers. He's cost-controlled. Just making $800K this upcoming season, was a former first-round pick. The Rangers are going to try to get what they can get out of him, and hopefully, he comes back with a good attitude and everything works out nicely. We will have to just wait and see there. And then, later in the first round that same season, at number 22 overall, the Rangers selected Keiondre Miller. So that was a heck of a pick there, and obviously Miller has already made his mark with this Ranger team. And then, of course, they pick Nils Lundkvist at number 28 overall. That was a pick, by the way, that belonged to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and that came to be the Rangers pick as a result of that wonderful trade that sent JT Miller and Ryan McDonagh to Tampa Bay. But as far as, just giving up on Nils Lundkvist, I mean, it's very early in the game to do that because, he is a very good offensive defenseman. He has an elite shot, is a very good passer as well. Before he came to the Rangers, he actually won the award in the SHL for the best Swedish-born defenseman in the league. And during that season, he pretty much lit up the score sheet. He ended up with, let's see, where is it here? He ended up with 32 points in 52 games, did a heck of a job there. And, that obviously shows the kind of skill that he does have. But again, it just comes down to opportunity for playing time, which there just doesn't seem to be for Nils Lundkvist right now on this Ranger team. As I mentioned, I think Drury wants to kind of strike while the iron's hot. He doesn't want Nils Lundkvist to just rot in Hartford for all these years and then try to trade him because by then you do lose some leverage. As far as what the Rangers could potentially expect to get in a trade for Nils Lundkvist, as I said just a couple of minutes ago, I don't think this is going to be some blockbuster trade where the Rangers package Nils Lundkvist and a bunch of other guys and a bunch of other draft picks and bring in like Patrick Kane or JT Miller. I just don't see that happening. I mean, it almost can't happen due to the current cap situation unless you trade somebody who's making a lot of money. And everybody on this team who's making a lot of money is very important to the Rangers and or has a full no-move clause. So can't see anything like that happening. I get the feeling if there is a trade here, it could be a situation where, Nils Lundkvist goes to a place where they have an opening for playing time and somebody comes back to the Rangers who's in a similar situation that Nils Lundkvist is currently, that being that there's just kind of a logjam, whether it's a defenseman. Although, trading for a defenseman kind of defeats the purpose of trading Lundkvist because you'll have the same problem. There'll be a logjam, and that guy won't be able to play. So maybe there's like a center somewhere, or a forward of some kind, a prospect of some kind that just it's not clicking with his current team. There doesn't seem to be a path of playing time, and maybe you just do like a one-for-one kind of a deal there. I think more likely, if Lundkvist is traded, though, it's probably going to be a situation where it's for a draft pick. And as far as what round it would be, I don't know. I mean, Lundkvist was drafted in the first round, but the one problem, we've already covered this, is that the Rangers right now don't really have a leg to stand on as it pertains to, what they ask for in a trade for Nils Lundkvist, because he's barely played in the NHL, and when he did, he didn't really play that great, and there were even times last year he was struggling at the AHL. So for me, if I'm a rival GM and I'm interested in Nils Lundkvist, I'm looking at this as a prime buy low opportunity because Nils Lundkvist could still go on to have a great career for himself in the NHL. Only time will tell there. But as far as what the Rangers get, I mean, look, there's 31 other NHL teams. I think one of them would probably give the Rangers a second-round pick. I don't think that's unreasonable, given the trades that we've seen over the past couple of years and what the going rate is for certain kinds of players. I think a second rounder is at least within reason for the Rangers. One other thing that I wanted to mention also about the report from Larry Brooks. I'm just going to read you, just a sentence from that article. The Post has learned that General Manager Chris Drury has been working with Lundkvist's agent Claude Lemieux in order to effect a trade to an organization in which the Swede would have a better opportunity to challenge for a top 4 spot and role as a power play quarterback. Good luck with that. I mean, look, Lundkvist, again, he's got a lot of potential. He's got that offensive skill that does not grow on trees when it comes to blue liners. But, a lot of these players, whether it's, Lias Andersson demanding a trade or, Kravtsov wanting to be traded, whoever it might be over the years here, everybody wants to, plant their flag in the ground and say, I want to be traded to this team over here, and I want to be a top 6 forward, or I want to be a top 4 defenseman, or I want to have a prominent role. I want to be on the top power play unit. I want to be out there when the game's on. They have all these demands, and it's like, well, okay, I mean, you're going to have to work for that. Nils Lundkvist, again, he wants to trade. It is what it is. He hasn't done enough in the NHL where I think some team, unless it's like a rebuilding, frankly, bad team that just wants to do a little trial by fire, I don't think that somebody's just going to hand him a top 4 spot. Now, granted, in this article, it says that he wants to challenge for a top 4 spot, so that's a little bit more realistic. But the idea that, again, guys, whether it's Anderson or Kravtsov or now Lundkvist, they want to be traded to this team, and this is the exact role I want for myself. You got to earn it. You got to earn it in this league. Nothing is given out to you for free. So we'll see. We'll see how this whole thing shakes out. I would imagine, going by this report from Larry Brooks, he, once again, the term that he used was that the Rangers are making an accelerated effort to try to trade Nils Lundkvist. So we'll see if it comes to fruition. There could be something, by the time you're listening to this episode, maybe the trade has gone through. It's pretty late at night on Thursday, so I don't think anything's going to happen just yet. But if and when a trade goes through, we'll obviously break it down on here and just kind of, attack it from all angles and just do what we do here. That'll pretty much do it for today. This is also your daily reminder that Tyler Mott is still a free agent. We'll see how that shakes out. And the other thing I want to mention, fantasy hockey. I've heard back from some old faces and some people that have played in the previous 2 seasons that want to come back for next season. I've also heard from some new faces as well. A reminder that we're also going to be moving everything over to ESPN this year. I just don't know what I'm doing on the Yahoo League. It just takes me forever to figure things out. ESPN, again, their Stanley Cup playoff coverage was less than perfect, shall we say, but I do like ESPN, the website, when it comes to fantasy sports, and I just get things done a lot faster there. So you can also, if you got an email from me about the league being renewed in Yahoo, just ignore it. I'm not going to do it. We're going to move to ESPN instead. But again, if you played last year, all you got to do is DM me on Twitter or email me, and your spot will be secure. If you did not play last year, do the same thing, and we'll save your spot in line, and we'll do everything we can to get you into the fantasy league. The other thing I want to mention, it is now September 1st, which means we have New York Ranger hockey this month. Now, granted, it is preseason hockey, but it's still going to be a lot of fun to get our first look at the 2022-2023 New York Rangers, start figuring out who's going to play what role, who's going to be on the power play, who's going to be on the penalty kill, who's going to be on this line, who's going to be on that line, who's going to make this team, all that good stuff. Going to be an absolute blast going through the preseason with you guys and getting ready for the start of the regular season as well. The Rangers kick off the preseason Monday, September 26th at home against the New York Islanders. They actually play 4 exhibition games in 5 days that week. And the other thing I want to mention, I mentioned this in a recent episode as well, but there are also going to be 2, I don't know if you want to call them scrimmages or actual games. I mean, they treat them like real games, but the Rangers are going to be playing the Flyers. It's going to be Ranger prospects against Flyers prospects. Those 2 games/scrimmages will happen on Friday the 16th and Saturday the 17th. So that's actually our first form of Ranger hockey of some kind or another. And whatever happens there, we'll definitely talk about that, and we'll see which Rangers improve their stock during those 2 games there against the Flyers. So definitely looking forward to that. A lot of fun stuff on tap for this month, but that will do it for today, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com, and definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that is @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely make sure to subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. There are a lot of things that go on there that are YouTube exclusive, including a recent appearance that I did on Locked On NHL with Mr. Gil Martin. So once again, thank you guys for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, go check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022, an 8-episode extravaganza to get you ready for the NFL season, the local team experts of the Locked On Podcast Network, plus a betting angle from Lee Sterling of Locked On Bets, all combining into one ultimate NFL preview. Search for Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022 on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.